Good morning. We're so excited for this conversation today with Dr. Ariana. Good morning, Dr. Ariana.
Good morning. Good morning. So happy to be here.
Thank you so much for your time, and it looks beautiful there.
Mm.
Um, so, just a little bit more about you. You're a trauma-informed psychedelic somatic IFS coach with a doctorate in naturopathic medicine. And with that, you specialize in PTSD, depression, anxiety, and substance use disorders. Combining traditional healing with modern techniques, you bridge the gap between mind, body, and spirit. Drawing from your own journey of recovery, Dr. Ariana guides clients to dissolve shame, nurture inner wisdom, and transform their relationship with substances and themselves. Wow. So, this is why we're so excited to talk to you because it's really like a blending of the worlds, right? And it's not black and white, and this is the right way, and this is the wrong way, right? It's really a coming together of using all the practices available and finding what works for your inner self, right?
Mhm. Totally. Totally. Mm.
Beautiful. So I'd love to start off by talking about or asking you a little bit more about, if you wouldn't mind sharing what your journey was to finding freedom from substances or alcohol, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. So definitely I was in the mix with alcohol, but also harder drugs, and really coming from a place of, you know, growing up highly sensitive, being in an environment that really wasn't that emotionally attuned, and, having a depressed mom, a kind of avoidant dad, and really not feeling like my emotions were okay to be felt, and feeling like I had to kind of hide, right? And then fast forward to college when I came out as queer, and all of the pain from childhood was like coming up, and I was like, let me just drink and do drugs and be this other person that I thought that people wanted me to be, while also kind of hiding from the pain that I was feeling. And this kind of fast forward, this kind of like snowballed, right? I was prescribed Adderall for ADHD. So I was Adderall, and then I would drink every night, Adderall, drink every night, Adderall, drink every night. And then that quickly turned into, cocaine, speed, GHB. And I found myself incredibly depressed and so burnt out and just surviving through the week. And I had been to therapy. I had gone to a nutritional therapist and had a lot of healing with my gut, but still, like, that depression was there. And that's really when I found out about microdosing. And this was back in like 2015, when not a whole lot of information was out there on microdosing. But I'm a super open and curious person, really open to alternative modalities. And so I started a microdosing journey with the intention to heal my depression. And little did I know that would help build the bridge between my subconscious and conscious. And I started to have the awareness that, oh my gosh, I'm trying to solve every single one of my mental health issues with substances, and solve every issue with substances, and really seeking that comfort outside of myself. And through that journey, I started to realize I have every single answer within me. I have everything within me. And 6 months into the microdosing journey, I actually went deeper into addiction first and hit bottom, and had this aha spiritual awakening moment where I had this dream. And in this dream, I saw this white swan who was on the verge of death. And I woke up the next morning, and that was the first time that I really saw how much I was hurting from these substances. And I believe that the medicine helped connect me to my spirit and help me see my own spirit. And then from there, I got sober rather intuitively. I followed that inner voice, that inner calling, and it was this wake up call, like, oh my gosh, I've got to take care of myself. Nobody else is going to do this for me. And from there, I stepped back from substances slowly and intuitively. I'm very pro harm reduction, meaning, you know, if you're using a less harmful substance. So I went from like GHB and speed back to alcohol and Adderall for a little bit. And then I let go of those and then was using, wine and cannabis quite frequently, but it was, less harmful, less harmful, less harmful. And it took me about 5 years to fully kind of heal. And then after getting sober, of course, then all of the pain underneath the substance use came forward. And so now I take clients through this in about 3 months of like healing their relationship to substances and really getting at the root. And so it doesn't have to be that long of a process. However, I really think that, everybody's timing is so beautiful and so unique. And yeah, if you're struggling right now, like trust your timing, trust that you're exactly where you need to be. And just you listening to this talk right now is a step forward on your journey.
I love all that so much, I don't even know where to start. I'm always telling, like, as a coaches, I feel like I really want my clients to get to the place where they feel like I'm feeling now, because I remember what it was like to be in that dark place too. But you can't rush it. You can't. It has to be like, you can't get one step before another one. Like, you have to be ready for the next step, so that this whole thing is sort of unfolding, as impatient as we might be, the way that it has to, in order for you to get to where you need to be.
Exactly. Yeah.
There's so much in this, and I feel like we could have a really long conversation about it. But I really want to point on this, like, this curious nature that you have. I think that is so key, and that's what we work with our clients with too, of just opening yourself up and getting really curious and stop judging yourself, right? And that's really hard for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I think the curiosity was the bridge for me to let go of the judgment. I'm curious by nature, but I also had this really bad habit of criticizing and judging myself. But when I could focus on that curiosity and just, like, I just want answers, when I'm just looking for those answers, I can let go of that judgment, because I'm trying to find, some answers, and I just lean into that. So that's what I try to encourage people to do. Is that how it felt like that was what worked for you?
Yeah. And I think that for me, using the medicine of microdosing helped bring in this non-judgmental third point of view of, this is very interesting. I'm using cocaine every weekend. And I'm feeling not so good. And it brought in, this element of curiosity, right? And it allowed for the self-judgment to maybe not be there as much, because it gave a little bit of distance, right, from myself and my patterns, right? So like when we're in patterns, when we're in depression, addiction, like all mental health disorders, we have our normal brain processes that are acting all the time. And it's called our default mode network. And so this default mode network can become overactive when we're in these processes. So in depression, like if you're like constantly ruminating or anxious, you're constantly worrying about this, or you're in addiction, you're constantly thinking about the cravings, right? What psychedelics do and what this medicine does is it helps disrupt that default mode network. So it almost like allows for new neural connections to be made. And it's almost like, you're trying to build this new path of being curious and changing your habits, but you have really tall grass, right? And you're like, how do I find my way, right? So what this medicine does is it helps to mow the lawn. So it's easier to find that new path. It's easier to build that new path. And And then, of course, like keeping an element of curiosity on the journey too, because microdosing and sobriety and any kind of healing modality that you're doing, there's always the potential for things to get worse first, right? A lot of the time when we're super depressed or we want joy, right? We're super in this pattern and we want to get out of it. There's a reason that we're there, and it's often we're blocking a lot of like our painful parts, a lot of grief or a lot of sadness or a lot of not wanting to look at our life, right? Because something in it is we don't love, and so we're just using to kind of put a band-aid on it, right? So when we start to uncover these things, in order to feel your joy, you've got to feel your grief, right? On the other side of grief is joy. And so depending on your intention, you could go through a process where you go through almost like a healing crisis. And we call this in naturopathic medicine, where it's a crisis, but it's healing, right? You're getting movement forward. And so even keeping curiosity in those moments of like, oh my gosh, okay, I'm feeling worse, but I'm curious about what is here and what's on the other side of this, and just being curious about our emotions, right? Our emotions just want to be felt. They're often like young parts of us that, didn't get heard, felt, and seen when they were feeling those things. And so how can we bring that curiosity to ourselves, almost like a child, like, oh yeah, what are you feeling? What is coming up? I'm right here with you.
That resistance, it's like we want the healing, but we're so afraid of it at the same time, so there's that resistance. And so that, for me, that made my journey to sobriety worse too. First, like as soon as I started doing the work, then I had all this resistance at facing some of that stuff, and it got worse before it got better. And I didn't, if I had known about all of this stuff with the microdosing and things, I had no idea that existed. But I do know that because I could not bridge that gap between the two different parts of my mind, I was struggling by this one part that was just trying to control everything, and this other part that wanted free. And I didn't know that there was a difference. Like it was so blurred for me at the time that if it was, I somehow managed to, because of the road that I went down, I found someone that showed me that difference, and it was like, and I could see it. And I've been to therapy so many times and was told this, but nobody gave me the tools to actually experience it and see that bridge. So I thought it was hopeless. I thought I was broken. There's something wrong with me because that's not working. And then I found my way. But that is the key, though, that seeing that there is that difference. And then I was able to get curious about, okay, so I see these two parts now, like how deep does it go? What can I, and it really did help me explore that and get more open to it, and then have compassion for myself, because it wasn't my fault. I wasn't doing this to myself. That was just the way that the life unfolded in my brain and all of this. So understanding all of that really, really helped. If I had known that there was another way to see, because I felt like I had tried everything. This is a good an important conversation for people to know, that if they haven't found that yet, that doesn't mean that you won't find it. That doesn't mean it's not, that answer's out there for you. That's why we're trying to share all of this information, so people have all these things that they can try to find that answer for themselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That's a really great point, because we're talking about resistance, and I think there's an acceptance that takes place of that all these emotions are human. It's just part of being human. And somewhere along the line, we were told that it's like bad to feel sadness and grief and all these bad negative emotions, right? But it's just all part of being human, and we have to feel them all, right? We can't selectively numb. And so, where, Dr. Ariana, what did you find were the biggest roadblocks in regulating your emotions?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm a very emotional person, as I think we all are, right? And I'm highly sensitive, and things impact me in big ways, and I've got big emotions, right? And when I was getting sober, it was like what are all of these feelings after so much numbing? It's like, what do I do with this? Right. And I found myself crying a lot or getting upset or getting angry, and like, how can I manage this? Right. And so I found that the biggest roadblocks for me personally, and I see this also with my clients, are number one, are nutrition and blood sugar regulation. So nutrition, blood sugar regulation, and also like cortisol dysregulation. So then that gets into the nervous system, right? So when our cortisol is going up and down and up and down and up and down throughout the day, as well with blood sugar up and down, up and down, up and down throughout the day, when we have that high, we feel great. But then when we crash, we get really dysregulated. And that's when we will have a craving for something external to us to fill it, because we don't have the neurotransmitters, we don't have like the stability of the blood sugar in our system. Um, Another huge one for emotional regulation for me was, yeah, just understanding the language of the emotions and learning to sit with them and learning it's okay to cry, and right, and also being able to, so I love how you brought in those kind of like that parts work, right? Because that's something that I do with my clients, is when we can, and something that I found hugely helpful for me as well, is being able to say, okay, this part of me is feeling sad. All of me is not sad. I have a part of me that feels really sad. And now from self, can I turn towards sad and say, hey, sad, like, what do you need? I'm right here. Or angry, right? When we can separate ourselves out from our anger and realize, like, oh, all of me is not angry. I have a part of me that's really upset that that happened, or that somebody did something to me, right? Anger is a beautiful emotion that lets us know when our boundaries have been crossed. And so we get to talk to anger and say, hey, what do you need from me? How do you want to be expressed? Do you need to go scream into a pillow? Do we need to punch some pillows? What do we need to do to let you out? And then how can I stand up for you and set that boundary or communicate? And that was one of the biggest blocks for me, was like, I would get consumed by the emotion and feel like all of me is triggered, all of me is angry, all of me has been abused, right? I had sexual abuse happen in my 20s during my addiction years of like, and then it's really hard to heal from that place of completely feeling like all of you is hurt. And then you get stuck in that victim mindset, right? That was another, yeah, huge block for me. And so being able to separate myself out from these really strong emotions and meet them in a, hey, we're on the same side, let's dance together, instead of like, I'm so upset that I'm feeling sad and I'm just gonna wallow in my room for an entire day, right? Yeah.
That's such an important point, because I think what our instinct is to just try to deny that part of ourselves and make it wrong, and that is resistance, and that's what creates all that like discomfort and all this. Like that's what I was like, that's when I know I need to look at something, because if I'm trying to make some part of me wrong that's feeling a certain way, the feeling's there for a reason. It's not for me to try to ignore it or make it wrong. It's just to look at it, like just look at it and give it space. And then as soon as I do that, and this has taken work, and it still takes a lot of practice, but when I do that, allow that, and not try to separate it from who I am and try to like make it wrong, and just kind of embrace it almost, it's all of a sudden it starts to like let go. It releases. Like I feel like I can move past it. I can't, otherwise I'm putting up these roadblocks, and I just keep hitting that roadblock over and over and over again.
Totally, totally, totally. And then the last thing I'll say about the emotional, blocks to emotional regulation, another big one can be hormones, right? So if we're noticing, and I definitely struggled with this, I was noticing, okay, 2 weeks before my period, I'm crying all the time. I'm feeling so irritable. I'm having a really hard time regulating my emotions, right? And that can be hormonal. So if you're like, okay, this is feeling way out of the ordinary, and I'm feeling way too upset for, way more upset than the situation warrants. Number one, it can be trauma, right? It can be a trigger from the past. But number two, it can be that you don't have enough progesterone in production during those 2 weeks, right? And so knowing that kind of holistic path of what is going on here, right? And this is why I love working with people, is because a lot of people don't know, right, what is happening. And I can look at it with fresh eyes, with my clinical eyes, with my experience, and be able to see like, okay, exactly what is going on and what are the things that we need to do to target to help you come back into balance.
Do you find that your clients get a little bit overwhelmed at all of this? Like, I know I would have like been so overwhelmed at looking at all of this stuff, like the hormones come into play, and I would have been like, so you, I would think, are able to help like reel that in for people and help understand that it's like a process, and then you have that visibility from being on the outside of it to help make the best choices, at least as far as finding what will work for them.
Exactly. Yeah. So, there's so many different processes going on in the body, and it can be really overwhelming to know, where do I start, right? I know my gut's jacked up. I know my hormones are feeling wonky, and I've got cravings, and I'm feeling sad. I'm like, what do I do? Right. And so, yeah, definitely that's, we start slow, and I'm able to direct, right, the client journey to what needs to be healed first in order to make like the biggest movement. And that kind of takes the weight off of somebody, because they're like, okay, I don't have to figure this all out on my own. We can be partners.
I think too, it's important to point out that having someone like you to guide them will help them from, because we tend to want to find the answers right now, and we put so much pressure on ourselves, and the more that we do that, the farther away from the answers we want. And so having someone to help you with experience that has been through this, that knows what they're doing, can help you stay on track and know that it's not supposed to be like a snap of the fingers. Like it has to go through these certain processes, and having someone work with you can help you be patient through that process, help you see that you're already making progress when you don't see it yourself. Because I think that's something that gets in people's way a lot. They think they're supposed to be here, but they don't see what progress they've already made, and having someone else in their life to help them with that is huge.
Exactly. And oftentimes, right, we're working in layers. So a lot of the time you'll have, for a lot of people, like the substance use is that top layer that they're like, okay, this is really struggling. This is really impacting my life. And once we kind of clear that, then they're able to see some other symptoms or some other things show up, and we're able to clear that. But I love what you brought in about, really honoring how far we've come, right? I have a client that I'm working with right now, and she has let go of wine, which is amazing. And yet she's still using a nicotine patch and like a little bit of Xanax at night. And she's like, why is it still here? Right? Like, I just want this to be gone. And it was being really hard on herself, right? And in the session, we were like, okay, and look at all of this beautiful progress that you've made so far, right? Like, she had 2 of her dogs pass over Christmas, and went through a whole grief process around that. And it's like, okay, you're in this really tender place right now. And I'm like, it's actually okay if you're using a little bit of Xanax at night and the nicotine patch, right? Like, we get to come at this from compassion. And she's like, what? No, I just want this gone. She's like, how much more compassion can I bring to myself? And it's like, yes, and that's the path, right? Because when we can recognize our success and when we can bring that compassion, then changes can be made. It's going to be really hard to make a change when we're constantly berating ourselves for like, continuing to do a substance. It's like, let's get curious, coming back to curiosity. Let's get curious about like, what is this patch doing for you? What is this Xanax doing for you? Like, what really is the benefit? Your system wouldn't be doing a substance if there was no benefit to it. Is it helping you stay calm, right? Is it helping you go to sleep? Okay, beautiful. Now let's add in, Now let's add in other tools and other things that help you calm, that help bring you to sleep. And I love doing that. It's like I have so many tools. Sorry about that. I have so many tools that we can add in before we're taking things away, right? When we just yank a substance away, there's a hole and it's really hard. How can we add things in? So then it's just like, it's an easeful letting go of this substance because I feel so full. I feel so nourished. I feel so good. And now my grip isn't so tight on this thing because I've got all these other things. And then it can just slowly loosen and let go. And yeah, I think that's like a really beautiful process.
That's so well put. And I think it really speaks to how important it is to find somebody that when you are working with somebody on this, right? Of who's going to guide you through this process with compassion and to have your back, because we know like we're strong, we can do this on our own, right? But it helps the process so much more to have somebody there to guide you. And it probably speeds things up a little bit than having to figure it all out on your own. But for those people maybe who aren't ready to work with somebody or want to try some things on their own first and kind of test the waters and get curious on their own, how can we, manage these big emotions and regulating these on, from a nutritional standpoint?
Good. Yeah. So the thing I love about nutrition is like, it's all basically, I mean, food costs money, but it's, these are generally like free things that you can bring into your life. So 30 to 50 grams of protein per meal. What is this going to do? This is going to help stabilize the blood sugar. When our blood sugar is out of whack, our emotions are out of whack, and then we've got cravings, right? Second thing about the protein is that the building blocks for our neurotransmitters are amino acids, which are the building blocks of proteins. So if we're not getting enough protein, we're not building neurotransmitters. Our body actually needs to make a whole brand new batch of neurotransmitters every single day. So if you're not getting enough protein that day, symptoms of depression, symptoms of, feeling sad, feeling, like you're like want that dopamine hit because you're not having that internal production. So number one, like if you do nothing else, 30 to 50 grams of protein every single meal. Next, no naked carbs. We don't want a naked carb. No, we want a cute, clothed, beautiful carb, right? So if you have a naked carb, if you have, let's say like a bag of chips at 2 p.m., that's going to cause a blood sugar spike and then a crash probably around 5. And then you're making dinner for the kids and you're like, I need a glass of wine because I'm in this really low state. If you look back at your day, did you have a naked carb? Did you have something that caused that blood sugar spike? And now you're having that dip and now you're having that craving. So, things like nuts, if you're having a carb, pair it with a protein, pair it with a fat, pair it with some fiber. I love, we need carbs. We actually need carbs, especially during the last 2 weeks of our menstrual cycle. We actually need more carbs. So carbs are not bad, right? It's just, the timing and what we're pairing it with that can really make a huge difference. Number two, in terms of using nutrition for emotional regulation, is really focusing on cycle syncing. So like I said, we need more calories, more carbohydrates 2 weeks before our cycle. When we're not giving ourselves that, that's when a lot of the symptoms of like irritability and crankiness and anxiety can come up, right? Because we're not feeding ourselves properly, right? Like it's okay when in recovery, like we need to nourish. We really need to nourish the body instead of restrict. And I see so much of this programming in women, especially, where food is another way for us to sabotage ourselves or for us to control something, right? And when we don't have alcohol, it's like we can get really hungry for sweets. And I know that that's a big thing in the recovery. It's like, okay, I'm not drinking, but like I've got my donuts, right? And you know, all I would suggest is, yeah, sweet potatoes, right? Brown rice, something a little bit more substantial, and then, you know, pair it with a protein and some fiber, and yeah, and then you're not in that up and down.
That was huge for me. Of Once I was able to remove wine, I could pay attention to how things were making me feel, right? I could pay attention to how caffeine was making me feel. I could pay attention to how food was making me feel. And what I noticed is I would get so engrossed in work all day and not get up from my desk, not get food. And so then, yeah, at the end of the day, I was hangry, right? And so being able to then get curious about that and be like, oh, okay, what if I what if I carried some almonds around with me, right? And I started, like, I know our bodies are all biodiverse, right? And so it really is getting curious and paying attention to how things make you feel. But eating like a protein snack every couple of hours for me works for me, right? And so it's really about finding what works for you. And if obviously you need help with that, working with somebody, right? Um, I know Jenny has a lot to say about food and control.
Yeah, I won't get too far into it, but it was the food that I used first. I started at a very young age using food for coping, controlling, soothing, all of those things, and I didn't realize that. I struggled with my weight off and on my whole life. And then I ended up having gastric bypass surgery. So that made it so I couldn't use food anymore. And that's when my drinking got worse. That's when I switched from food to alcohol, which is very common for people that have had that surgery or similar surgeries, because and they know this when you go in and do your consultation. They ask you those questions, they warn you about it, but I don't think they go deep enough in to the psyche, the reasons why we're eating, the reasons why we're having those problems to begin with, and then following up with, you know, what we're doing afterwards. So I mean, I think on some level I knew this, but I just wanted to feel better. I just wanted to, and I thought looking better would make me feel better. Like all of these things were mixed up in my mind. So, but after I got through the journey with alcohol, I started to realize those connections and started, now food is not as much, it doesn't control me the way that it did, nor does alcohol. Like, so now that I have this awareness of things, I'm being able to see those connections, and it's little by little. Like it's there's still things that I know aren't good for. I still have sugar. Like I love sugar. I have ADHD too, but that explains some of the sugar cravings, but so everybody's gonna have those different things. So I'm giving myself the space to just notice, and little by little, not trying to do everything at once, because otherwise I know myself, I'll quit. So it's allowing some things, working on the most, like what's causing me the most trouble right now. At first it was food, then it became the alcohol. That became a thing that I could not ignore. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had to deal with that first. I went back to sugar and sweets and stuff for a while when I first was getting off alcohol, But then that slowly started to, like, as I started to regulate and started to see things differently and work on my health holistically, then I started letting go of the food too. So it was all like, it all comes together if you just work on, you know, the most important things and give yourself that grace to figure those things out first. But yeah, it's so tied together.
Yeah. Wow, what a beautiful, I mean, not a beautiful journey, but this is like a beautiful story, right? And that transferring of addiction from one thing to another, right? And something you said, it's like giving ourselves grace again, right? And I kind of see that like when we have a craving or the pattern switches to another substance or you have a like relapse. I don't love the term relapse because I don't think that you're starting over at square one when you use again. It's another beautiful invitation of like, oh, okay, there's another trigger here, or there's something else to work on. And yeah, like when we can heal that root and just focus on those things, yeah, the patterns begin to shift. They're going to shift. Yeah.
Sometimes those things are necessary in order for you to see that there's that pattern there. Like I tell my clients all the time, you needed to have this data point. Like if you didn't, you keep hitting this, like you have to get through this. You have to look at it in that way and use it. And then you're going to get past it. So it's sometimes it's necessary, I think. And it definitely was for me.
Yeah. Mm.
Yeah. That's the terminology we use too. We don't use relapse either.
Yeah.
But data point, right? Because we're able to look at it and collect data from it to get into these patterns, right? And so, yes, everything ties together and we can see it with the food. And we also have these human bodies, right? So what are some like physical tools that we can access with regulating these emotions?
Yeah. Oh, so I mean, one really easy thing is shaking. So at the end of every day, just spend like 2 minutes bouncing up and down and shaking. And you can even couple in some like, right? It's going to feel weird at first. It's going to feel weird at first. It's okay. Just shaking it out, right? Getting that charge out of the nervous system, right? So our nervous system knows how to process these emotions. It's only our like secondary consciousness that kind of gets in the way of the processing of those. And one of the ways our system, if you look at an animal that's been in a state of stress, right, it'll shake and then it'll go on, right? And so you can just kind of like think about that and embody, you know, an animal, and you're just kind of shaking at the end of the day. That can really help just discharge some stress and complete that stress response so that you're not holding on to that cortisol. Another thing that I love for regulating the emotions is touch. And we can be so touch starved, and just even placing your hand over your heart. Like even now, just doing it, I'm feeling calmer, I'm feeling more regulated, I'm feeling more connected, I'm feeling less alone. And so using our physical body to presence with ourselves and bringing in an element of pleasure. So letting yourself feel like the softness of your skin, letting yourself just dip into the moment of being with yourself. What is that going to do? That's going to pump out the oxytocin, right? Then our feel-good neurochemicals. And a lot of the times with myself, with my clients, we have a very disjointed relationship with pleasure and sensuality. And it can be a big cause of these like shadow self-sabotaging substances because we don't want to allow ourselves pleasure. So then we seek pleasure in these like shadow ways, right? With food, with alcohol, right? It's like, oh, I just want to feel good, but I don't really feel like I deserve feeling good, and I don't like feeling good. So I'm going to do it in this kind of harmful way, right? So when we can give ourselves pleasure with touch, I'm a big fan of self-pleasure, yoni massage, presencing with the yoni, giving ourselves orgasms. This is going to help regulate us. We're going to feel calmer. We're going to have those endorphins. We're going to feel like we're in our power when we can take that back for ourselves. And then we're moving through the day like centered and calm and regulated, right? Instead of, yeah.
Yeah, and there's so much shame tied into those behaviors too, when we're seeking things outside of ourselves to comfort ourselves that we know aren't good for us, right? And then that continues the vicious cycle.
Yeah, women too, like, it's like we can't even give ourselves a break sometimes and enjoy any kind of pleasure without guilt. So it's like, yes, we have to be able to feel pleasure in all these different ways, and not feel guilty about it or wrong about it, whatever it is. Like, and that's why we end up doing these things that are actually self-destructive.
Yeah. 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 We are, yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, like, we are sensual beings, right? We are made to experience things. We're made to feel, and we're made to touch, we're made to listen. And we're actually here on this planet to experience the goodness of life. And knowing that, like, we deserve that, right? We as women deserve rest. We deserve nourishment. We deserve pleasure. Like, literally, we are the only beings that have an organ whose sole purpose is pleasure, right? Our clitoris. Like, we are literally built to be in that flow. And when we can honor that, like, even if it's 2 minutes of just putting on a song and moving through the day, like, being in your feminine flow is going to help you more than you know.
And so I guess, as I'm thinking about this, I really didn't even know what emotions I was having when I quit drinking. It just all, or even when I was drinking, obviously, it just all felt like a lot. That's what it felt like. Just a lot of things. And it was traffic and it was noisy. And so I guess to help regulate these, we really need to like know what emotion we're experiencing so that we know which kind of path to help us, which kind of tool we need to help us. And so how do we help recognize these emotions that we're experiencing?
Yeah. So I recommend looking up an emotions wheel. We can look it up on Google. It's a little wheel of all the different emotions. And it's not an exhaustive list, but it's something. And I recommend having that up like on your fridge, on your wall, like even somewhere where you can see it every day. And it's even helpful to put it somewhere that maybe you associate with, like, the cupboard where you used to hold your wine or the fridge with food in it. And just if you have a craving or if you have some dysregulation, just go over to that image, or if you have it on your phone, and take a look at it and see what emotion matches up. And it's going to take practice, right? Most of us were not taught how to process our emotions or even name our emotions when we're little. We're living in a very like emotionally unaware society. And so give yourself grace. Like, it is going to be like teaching a child. And so if you don't know what emotion you're having, yeah, go ahead and look at that emotions wheel and name the emotion and just start there. Like, just practice matching what you're feeling with an emotion, with a word. And if you don't know the emotion, that's okay. You can just, again, hand over the heart, hand over the belly, notice where you're feeling the emotion or whatever sensation you're feeling in the body, and just take a couple deep breaths with it. Like sometimes it's not even necessary to know what the emotion is, right? The emotion just wants to be felt. Emotions are energy in motion. So if you can just give it that chance to process through, most emotions only last for about 90 seconds. 90 seconds, right? And I don't know about you, but I've definitely spent an entire day avoiding a little ping of grief. And I'm like scrolling on Instagram and I'm like working and I'm doing other things. And then at the end of the day, I'll like cry for a couple minutes. And I'm like, oh, that's what that was, right?
I was gonna
So
say, I'm like, they go past if you don't resist them. If you resist them, then you're not getting
and
rid
they
of it.
just, yeah, exactly. So I'm in this too, right? All these things that I'm sharing about, like I am right here with you. I am like still doing these practices too. And so I don't want you to think that any of us, me or like are up here and you're down here, right? Like we are all in this together. And these are the things that I'm sharing are the tools that I have found work for me and my clients. And it's still a practice, right? And so, yeah, just like hand over the heart, hand over the belly, breathing a couple of minutes with that sensation. And that's going to be a practice too, right? And, it can be helpful to set an alarm on your phone 3 times per day to just presence with yourself if you find it really hard to take that time. Yeah.
Yep. I absolutely did that as well, of just taking a minute, like setting an alarm for a minute a few times a day to breathe
Yeah.
intentionally.
Yeah.
And that was a huge game changer. And so for those people, they try these tools, right? And or maybe they've already tried them and now they're hearing about microdosing and they're really curious about what could happen with this. My story is a little bit different. I had been alcohol free for almost a year when I used some ketamine treatments with my psychiatrist to really get to some like deep, trauma kind of stuff. So, how would you recommend that people go about this if they're interested in it, and how does it help aid them in their journey?
Yeah, beautiful. So I have a intuitive sobriety microdosing roadmap guide that is a guide on how to potentially get started with this medicine of like what is it doing, how is it helpful, how to find your protocol, how to create it or how to do it in an intentional way that's going to serve you, because I will say that microdosing is not for everybody, right? These are strong medicines, and even when used at small amounts, they shift your consciousness. And so if you're somebody who struggles with like schizophrenia, bipolar, if you're taking lithium, like this is not for you. And if you have any questions on if it's for you, go ahead and like DM me. I'm happy to chat about it. We can have a free consult. But basically what the medicine is helping us do, right, is building that bridge between the subconscious and conscious. It's allowing for those new patterns to take place, and it's allowing for a little bit of distance from ourselves. So kind of like what I was saying with the emotional regulation, we're like, I'm so consumed by it. What the microdosing can help do is like give us a little bit of space to where, I had a client who got sober and then started her microdosing journey. And she found that with her daughter, she was like able to not react with anger. She was actually able to pause and reflect and then greet her daughter in a different way and process her anger elsewhere. So it just allows a little bit of space, a little bit of extra spaciousness, right? Which is so often what we so badly need. We're like so full to the brim and so like entangled with everything. We just need a little bit of space. And that's what the medicine can provide, is just a little bit of spaciousness to see ourselves in a new light, to act in a different way. And what I found, and what my clients have found is that the microdosing can help give us a, it's a serotonin potentiator, right? So it helps us to feel like a microdose should feel like a subtle uplift in mood, a little bit of energy, and a little increased awareness, right? So you're feeling a little bit better, and you're able to notice. So for me, like it's like I'm able to notice the beauty of a tree. I'm able to notice like, oh, the pleasure of this cup of tea. Oh, I'm just noticing it more now because I'm more aware. Like it brings in that awareness, and it brings in that connection to mindfulness in a way that lets you savor things in a new way. And when you're savoring things in a new way, when you're getting pleasure from like looking at a tree and you're like, oh my gosh, this tree is beautiful. It's like, oh, I don't want a drug. Like I've got this tree, like life is beautiful. Right? It really, what it did for me is like I had my grips on these colored rocks that were my drugs. And I was gripping and I was gripping. And with the microdosing journey, it was like, wait a minute. I am surrounded by diamonds. I'm surrounded by diamonds. And the grip just loosened and was able to let go of the colored rocks. It's like, oh, look at what's around us. Look at this beauty. And so microdosing helps bring in that magic of life again. It's like looking at things with new eyes, like a child, right? And that's really powerful medicine, to be able to get back to that whimsical nature of a child and just be in the moment and be in life, and then be able to have that distance and relatedness with others, and that deeper connection with yourself, that more compassion. Yeah, it's powerful medicine.
Yeah, I was just thinking how, we're a part of nature. We're designed to find pleasure in nature, right? To get dopamine rushes from being part of nature. But when we've been using substances that create this artificially high levels of dopamine, it resets our hedonic state. And so we're not able to connect with those same natural pleasures that we once were. And so this kind of helps you reset it, is what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah, totally.
Mm.
Yeah. And then it can also help bring up, like you said, with your ketamine treatments and the trauma, right? It can help bring up and unearth things that need to be cleared in order for you to feel better, in order for you to feel your joy, to feel your connection, to let go of the substances. And so again, this is why it's really important to do this work with a practitioner, helping like walk alongside you, because things can like bring up old material that you thought was gone, and now it's sitting here at your lap and you're like, what do I do with this, right?
Or
And
that you didn't
so
even know was there, because I've seen so many people. Yeah.
exactly, yeah, so walk gently with it, right? There's a lot of buzz around microdosing right now. And I think it's amazing that we're talking about this and that we're being able to use these tools. And, right, it's a powerful medicine. Tread lightly, reach out. If you're interested, please reach out. You can download my free guide and get some more information there. But
Where do they
really, like,
find you, Dr. Ariana?
yeah, so my Instagram is at dr.ariana, Ariana Macartney, Macartney. And I have a link to the free guide there, and I think there's going to be a link in the show notes for the free guide. And yeah, you can send me a DM. I'm always happy to chat.
That's beautiful. And I'm looking forward to this guide. This was an amazing conversation. I wish we could talk more. Maybe you host a retreat one day so we could just all come together and do this, because that sounds amazing to me. But I know you are busy, and we really, really appreciate your time and everything that you shared here with us today. I think that it's going to offer some hope.
Mm, Thank you so much. This has been a really juicy conversation. We've like touched on all the things and my heart is feeling so happy, and it's been, yeah, really nourishing to connect with you both.
Thank you so much for your time. I know I'm like, can we do another one?